The fact of the matter is, Bob Mueller did not look at the government's activities. He was not going back and looking at the counterintelligence program. And we have a number of investigations underway that touch upon it, the main one being the Office of Inspector General that's looking at the FISA warrants. But as far as I'm aware, no one has really looked across the whole waterfront.
All right, so what if it really was a witch hunt? The Attorney General of the United States not saying that to our Bill Hemmer, but indicating that maybe this investigation of the president started on a false premise and maybe a faked one. House Oversight Committee ranking member has been arguing that for quite some time. The Ohio Republican Jim Jordan says that the Attorney General is indeed serious about getting to the bottom of this, as is he. And it's very good to have you, Congressman. Thank you.
Good to be with you, Neil.
So let's talk a little bit about whatever the Attorney General wants to do with this separate investigation of the investigation. How will that compare to what the Inspector General will release when his report's out?
I mean, the short answer is we don't know. What I do know is Bill Barr is not just serious. I think he's very serious. He said in his interview with Bill Hemmer that someone may have put their thumb on the scale. He's concerned about that. Did that actually happen? When you take that statement and couple it with what he said 4 weeks ago in front of the Senate, when he said that he felt there was a failure of leadership at the upper echelon of the FBI, that was certainly the case. He said spying did occur. There's a basis for his concern about the spying that took place. And then probably fourth and most importantly, he used two terms that should scare every American. He talked about unauthorized surveillance and potential political surveillance. So I think he is starting from the right premise, and he is very serious about finding out what exactly took place when they launched this whole Trump-Russia investigation in the first place.
Do you think that when the Mueller investigation started, they ever looked at it, the Attorney General dismissed it, the possibility that it was a false premise?
I don't think they did. And go back and look at the charge they were given by Rod Rosenstein. It was very broad. It said, you look at Trump, Russia, you look at the interference in the election. Was there any type of coordination between the Trump campaign and Russia to do this? And then it said, or anything arising there out of that. So it was pretty broad charge that they had. In fact, they ended up going after Manafort for failure to registering as a lobbyist and all these other areas. So why not look at that? Why not look at, was the dossier verified? Did they actually, how did that whole thing get used at the FISA court? Why not look at that? Obviously they didn't, and Bill Barr is going to, along with, of course, the Inspector General, whose report we expect now any week.
James Comey, if you're right, lied.
Well, it's funny because you got Comey and Brennan pointing at each other, so we don't know how this all took place. We've seen some of those text messages, and one sort of blaming the other. Was the dossier part of the intelligence community assessment? Was it not? Who wanted to include it? Who didn't? But I think, as Bill Barr said, there was a complete failure of leadership at the upper echelon of the FBI. Comey was fired. Andy McCabe, deputy director, fired, lied 3 times under oath, according to the Inspector General. Jim Baker, the chief counsel at the FBI, demoted and left, currently under investigation by the Justice Department. And it's interesting who in the Justice Department. John Durham in Connecticut, who's actually going to lead Bill Barr's investigation of this whole thing. Lisa Page, demoted and left. And Peter Strzok, deputy head of counterintelligence, who ran both the Clinton investigation, launched and ran the Russian investigation. He was demoted and then fired. So when he talks about a failure of leadership, I mean, that's a pretty accurate description of what was going on at the top levels of the FBI.
You know what happens with this stuff, Congressman? People see things through their political prism. 80% of Republicans are on board investigating the origins of this investigation. A like amount, I don't know the exact percentage, sir, of Democrats, just the opposite. And I'm wondering what all this will mean going into 2020. Is it going to be whatever the justification on both sides to continue Democrats pounding the Mueller report and the details, Republicans now getting to what prompted the Mueller report and its details, that it's going to fall on deaf ears or voters who are just tired of it?
Well, I mean, I look at the facts. The fact I just described the top 5 people at the FBI. That's not Republican or Democrat. Those are facts. They were fired. They did do those wrong things. Some of them are under investigation. Some of them lied 3 times under oath. Those are facts, and Democrats should look to that too. So this should be about the facts. And most importantly, I love the letter that Emmett Flood sent to the Attorney General 2 weeks ago, where he said, if, in fact, this stuff took place, this leaking to go against the president, this spying on the president and his campaign, if in fact it happened, if that can happen to the President of the United States, imagine what they can do to you and I. Imagine what they can do to the folks I get the privilege of representing in the 4th District of Ohio. And that's the fundamental point. This is not supposed, if it did, this is never supposed to happen in the United States of America. And all the evidence seems to point, the facts and the evidence seems to point to it actually occurred and took place. And Bill Barr is doing the right job. He is going to find out if in fact it took place like I think it did.
Do you know how long that investigation would likely last?
I don't. I do know that Michael Horowitz is going to have his done soon. He's been at it almost a year.
He
said
sometime general there,
yeah, sometime soon. I do not know when Bill Barr and John Durham and his team will have this investigation completed.
Congressman, always good to have you. Have a good weekend, sir. Thank you.
You too. Thank you.